The morning had started like any other in the Thompson household. Emma poured herself a cup of coffee and settled onto the couch, savoring the first quiet moments of the day. But the peace didn't last. A loud crash from the kitchen sent her bolting to her feet. There stood Max, her 6-month-old golden retriever, in the middle of the chaos. A bag of flour had fallen from the counter, bursting open on the floor. Max, now covered in white powder from nose to tail, wagged his tail happily, oblivious to the mess he had made. He had even managed to chew the corner of the flour bag, his face dusted with guilt and curiosity. Emma sighed, leaning against the doorframe, and asked herself,
"Max, what am I going to do with you?"
Max was a lively puppy, full of energy and mischief. But like most young dogs, he had no idea what was expected of him. He didn't know that shoes weren't toys, that counters weren't meant to be climbed, or that visitors weren't thrilled by his enthusiastic jumping. Emma had reached the end of her rope. She had tried everything. She knew how to train her puppy. Snacks, toys, even some YouTube tutorials. But every time she thought they were making progress, Max would fall back into his old habits. It was clear she needed help, but from where? That's when her husband, Tom, suggested something she hadn't considered. "I was talking to James at work," Tom said, casually flipping through the newspaper. "He had a similar issue with his dog and he hired a trainer. His dog's a lot calmer now. Maybe we should give it a try." Emma looked up, intrigued.
"A dog trainer?"
Tom nodded. "Yeah, James said it was worth it. The guy really knows his stuff." Emma wasn't entirely convinced. The thought of inviting a stranger into her home to handle Max seemed like a big step. But at this point, anything felt like a better solution than the endless cycle of frustration. The next day, Emma called the trainer. His name was Mark, and he had a reputation for turning wild puppies into well-mannered dogs. After a brief conversation, Emma felt a little more at ease. Mark wasn't just a trainer. He was someone who seemed to understand the challenges dog owners faced. Mark arrived promptly at the scheduled time, dressed casually, and exuded calm confidence. Emma was surprised at how approachable he seemed. He immediately crouched down to Max's level, offering him a few gentle pats on the head before standing up again. "First things first," Mark said. "We need to build a solid foundation. Max needs to understand that behaviors aren't just about what he does, but how he feels when he does it." Over the course of their first session, Mark taught Emma some fundamental techniques. First, they worked on basic commands: sit, stay, come. But it wasn't just about getting Max to follow instructions. Mark explained the importance of making each command clear, consistent, and rewarding the right responses. Every time Max followed through, a treat and praise followed. Every time he failed, they gently redirected him back to the task. But it wasn't just about training Max. Mark also taught Emma how to manage her own responses. She had been inadvertently reinforcing Max's behavior by giving him too much freedom when he misbehaved. Instead, Mark emphasized the power of patience and consistency. "You need to be the leader Max looks to, not just the one who cleans up the messes," he explained. By the end of the first session, Emma felt more empowered. Mark had shown her that with patience and clear boundaries, Max could begin to understand what was expected of him. But more importantly, she began to feel a shift in how she approached their relationship. She wasn't just trying to fix a behavior. She was building a mutual understanding with her dog. The next few days were challenging but hopeful. Emma followed the trainer's guidance, keeping sessions short and focused. Max didn't always get it right, but he was starting to make progress. He learned that the word sit didn't just mean a sound, it meant something. And stay wasn't optional. It came with a reward. Emma began to notice small but significant changes. Max was still the playful puppy he had always been. But now, when she asked him to sit before feeding him, he didn't hesitate. When they went for walks, he responded better to her calls. The improvement wasn't dramatic, but it was there, and it was enough to keep her motivated. Tom noticed it too. "Hey, he's not jumping all over me when I come home anymore," he said one evening, surprised. "I'm impressed." Emma smiled.
It's just the beginning, but it's progress.
As the days went by, Emma couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. Max, her mischievous puppy, was starting to change. Sure, it wasn't overnight, but after Mark's first session, Emma was beginning to see small improvements. Mark had told her that training a dog wasn't a race, but a gradual process that required patience and consistency, and Emma was beginning to understand just how true that was. It was a quiet morning when Emma decided to test Max's progress. She had been practicing sit and stay with him for a few days now, and although Max still had his moments of distraction, there were fewer than before. Today, she felt more confident than ever. "Max," Emma said, her voice calm but firm. "Sit." Max looked up at her, his tail wagging, as usual, but this time he didn't dart off. Instead, he paused. His body seemed to stiffen, as if he was trying to remember something important. Then, with a little nudge from his paws, he lowered himself into a sit. Emma's face lit up. "Good boy." Her excitement was clear, but she held back from showering him with too many treats. She knew that if she continued to reward every little thing, Max would soon expect it as the norm. Mark had explained that it was important to let the behavior sink in before moving forward with the rewards. She repeated the command a few more times, and each time Max responded faster, more reliably. After a few minutes, Emma felt the first real shift in her approach. This wasn't about just getting Max to listen. It was about working together, building a partnership where he understood the boundaries and she understood his signals. The bond between Emma and Max had begun to solidify. Emma had kept up with the short training sessions Mark recommended, no more than 10 to 15 minutes at a time, spread throughout the day. The sessions were less about drilling commands and more about laying a foundation for trust. Max was still a puppy, but he was starting to show signs of becoming the dog Emma had always hoped he would be. One morning, after a quick breakfast, Emma got ready for another round of training. Max had started to pick up on the sit command, but Mark had emphasized that training wasn't just about obedience. It was also about teaching the dog how to learn. This meant introducing new cues and testing Max's ability to focus, especially when distractions were around. Emma opened the door to the backyard, where the sound of birds chirping filled the air. Max immediately perked up, distracted by a fluttering leaf near the fence.
"Max, sit."
Emma said, her voice steady. Max hesitated, his eyes following the leaf as it danced on the wind. But Emma had learned to be patient. She waited a moment, allowing Max to refocus. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Max lowered himself into a sit.
"Good boy."
Emma praised, crouching down to give him a treat. Max seemed pleased, but Emma could tell he was still testing the boundaries. The next few minutes were a series of distractions: children riding bikes in the distance, a squirrel darting across the yard, and the neighbor's dog barking just out of sight. But Emma stood her ground. She wasn't going to let these small interruptions derail their progress. Each time Max tried to break the set, Emma gently but firmly guided him back into position, rewarding him when he succeeded. She could already see the transformation happening. Max wasn't just following commands anymore. He was learning to control his impulses and stay focused, even in the face of distractions. Despite the progress, the training wasn't without its challenges. Max was still a puppy, and like all puppies, he had moments of rebellion, something that would soon be proven. A few weeks later, Emma decided to host a small family gathering. Her relatives had been traveling and hadn't visited in a while, so it was the perfect opportunity to reconnect. Max, now a little older and somewhat better behaved, was thrilled at the prospect of all the attention. At first, everything went smoothly. Max greeted the guests with his usual tail-wagging excitement, but he didn't jump on anyone. He stayed down, sat on command, and waited patiently for belly rubs. It seemed like a success, at least for a while. As the gathering continued, Max's excitement began to bubble over. His curiosity and energy started to take control. He darted through the kitchen, swiped a few snacks from the counter, and knocked over a glass of water in the process. The guests laughed, but Emma could feel the situation slipping into chaos. Max's tail wagged furiously as he sprinted past the food table, knocking over a few items. Then, to everyone's surprise, he leapt into Emma's aunt's lap. Her gasp of surprise was followed by the clatter of a bowl of crackers hitting the floor. Emma rushed over, trying to stay calm.
Max, down.
She commanded firmly, but Max, lost in the excitement, didn't respond. He was too caught up in the commotion to focus. The guests tried to help settle him down, but Max seemed determined to keep the party going, racing around the room and dragging his leash behind him.
Okay, we need a break,
Emma said, exhaling heavily. She gently guided Max out of the living room, away from the chaos. She said to herself,
this isn't working.